Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, with Season 9 coming to a close in around 3 months, it's hard to believe Season 9 is almost over, but since it is, in this video, we're going to be going over 10 tips to help improve your rank climb for the end of the season. So if you do end up following everything in this video, all of the tips, then I can always guarantee that you will end up climbing for the end of season and you will find success. So with that being said, let's get started. So to start it off here, something that no matter what elo you are in, everybody can improve on this, and that is tracking the enemy jungler in the early game so that you die less to ganks. A lot of the time, especially in lower elos, solo laners will die to a gank in the early game and they'll end up blaming their jungler for not being there. They'll end up calling jungle difference because the enemy jungler ganked their lane and their jungler didn't. But chances are you could have avoided the gank if you just tracked the enemy jungler and you knew where he was on the map. So in every single one of your games, you should know where the enemy jungler will be looking to path and where his first gank is gonna be based on which laners arrive to lane first, or which side laners arrive to lane first. So in this game here, let's just take a look. Let's see if the top laner or the bot laners arrive first. So in this game here, Camille is gonna just walk into lane. So as the red side team, you know 100% that the Graves is starting on the bot side of the map. Fiora walks in at 142, so a little bit later than Camille, but it's still too early for her to have ended up leashing for her Sejuani. So as the blue side team, you can also know that the Sejuani is starting bot side. So both teams should know that the first gank target in this game is gonna be on the top side of the map. Graves and Sejuani are very unlikely to look to do like a bot side gank here. It can happen sometimes, but most of your games, like I'd say 90% of your games, with this information, you should play it like the junglers will be ganking top side or will be towards the top side of the map at around 3 minutes. So let's just fast forward this here and take a look at where the enemy junglers, or where the junglers end up pathing. So we can see here Sejuani making her way to the top side of the map, clearing out Raptors. Fast forward a little bit more here. All right, so she's gonna clear Raptors on the red buff. So 2 minutes 50 seconds she starts the red buff. This would be a really good time as the top laner to just get a ward in, maybe even like a little bit before then, but 250 is usually a good time. You can see Sej 3 minutes 15 is top side. Camille does have a ward down right now, so she does know, she should know that she is gonna be getting ganked at this time in the game. And if you guys can just use this, like Camille, there's no reason for her to really die there, right? Like she should know Sejuani is gonna be top side and she should have played that a little bit safer there. So if you're this Camille in this situation for future games, then you should not be dying to that gank because you should know Sejuani will be topside at that time. Now, one of the best early game wards for tracking the enemy jungler is just putting a ward on their Raptor camp. That's usually the best early game ward right now. Pixel Bush ward, pretty useless since the Scuttle Crab changes went through. Most junglers don't path into the river until 3 minutes into the game, so by that time, your ward is going to be expired and you're just going to be wasting a ward a lot of the time if you do plant it in Pixel Bush. But getting a ward on the Raptor camp will allow you to see where the enemy jungler is pathing in the early game. What you can also do is just take a look at where your jungler is on the map. If you notice that your jungler is invading the enemy's top side, then chances are the enemy jungler is going to be on the bot side of the map. So you can use information, or you can use the information that your jungler is providing you to decide on where the enemy jungler will be. So for number 2, it does not have to do with gameplay specifically, it more so has to do with your mental state, and that is you should only play when you are focused and you don't have any distractions. Now feel free to disagree with me on this, but I do feel like a lot of players are held back because they just are not in the correct mental state when they're playing. They don't have the right mindset, they don't know how to improve, and they're just kind of spamming games over and over again. They're just hoping that something will change. But if you're just spamming games over and over, you're not focused during your games, then you're not going to improve no matter how many games you play. So in my opinion, if you can play just like 5 super focused games a day, you're going to be much more productive, or that's going to be much more productive than if you just play 10 autopilot games and you're just not focused during those games. You just don't have anything you're looking to improve on. So just make sure that you are going into each game with a purpose, that you're focused, and you just do not have any other distractions. Now for number 3, back to a gameplay tip, do not over prioritize objectives when it's risky for you to start them. It doesn't matter what elo you're in, you're gonna see people way too often over prioritize dragon when it's very risky for them to start it. You'll see a lot of the times the bot lane will end up getting a double kill. They'll be super low on HP, they'll have a lot of gold in their pocket, but they'll just want to do the infernal dragon when the enemy jungler and the enemy mid are still alive. They'll end up getting chunked from that dragon being super low. Enemy mid will come in, just get a double kill on them, take the dragon as well, and there's just a lot of situations where you just need to not greed for objectives, and you just need to realize that you don't need to take that objective if you already have a lead in the early game. Giving up a dragon in the early game is not going to be the reason to why you throw the game. The reason to why you throw the game is going to be because you try to go for that objective, you give up a shutdown gold to the enemy team, they get the dragon as well. So just be aware of the current state of the game. If you do already have a lead in the early game, if you're doing really well, then don't just end up throwing it by going for a risky play that there's no reason for you to do. Reset in that situation, spend your gold, get HP, then look to group for that infernal, because if you group for the infernal and you're full HP, your whole team is there, then chances are you're gonna be able to win that fight, you're gonna take the infernal, and you're gonna snowball the game even harder. So next up here, play around your win conditions and what your comp is built for. So this is going to change every single game, and it's something that if you're new to the game, it's probably going to take you a while to realize, and it's going to take you a little bit to get used to like your win condition or what your team comp is best at. But every single game, if you notice you have a fed member on your team, then just look to play around them. Oftentimes players will try to be the hero themselves, or they'll try to make plays when it's very risky for them to do so if they're behind. But if you got a teammate who's super fed, say you got like a top laner who's 5-0 or something, and you're down in the bot lane, you've just died once, then don't try to play super aggressive for no reason. Let your top laner snowball this game, let your top laner carry you in the mid to late game. Don't try to make plays by yourself, play around your fed carries, play around who is doing well on your team, and if you do that, you're just gonna win a lot more games. This is another one that you will see no matter what elo you're in. I had a game a couple days ago where my jungler, he just did not play around my winning lane and my top laner's winning lane. He tried to make these solo invade plays. He tried to 1v1 the enemy jungler. The enemy Kha'Zix ended up getting super fed, and he just ended up carrying the game because my jungler did not realize what his laners were doing. He didn't realize that his laners were winning. He could just play off of them, and he tried to make solo plays by himself, which cost us the entire game. So just make sure you are looking at the map, make sure you're realizing who's fed on your team, and just look to play around them. And then in regards to your team comp, don't be that player that calls FF15 when you have something like a Nasus top lane and a Vayne AD carry. If you have a scaling team composition, then just look to stall out. Don't try to force random fights. Just keep farming up, farm up, stall out the game. Once you get to 2 to 3 items on your Vayne and your Nasus, you're going to start winning team fights, and you're going to end up winning that game. In lower elos, games are going to be thrown. Games are going to always be extended longer than they have to be, like 99% of the time. So just don't give up, especially like in the lower elos, because so many games are going to be thrown and you're going to be able to come back no matter the situation. So number 5 is going to be learn to adapt to how your team is playing if they will not listen to you. This is something that I've really had to work on myself, because I feel like my macro play is definitely my strong suit. My micro is a little bit weaker than my macro, so I generally know what the correct play is going to be on the map a lot of the time. But if my team is not listening to me, if my team doesn't end up pushing bot when I want them to, then instead of me just going bot lane and pushing by myself, I should just still look to group up with my team and play with my team, especially if you do have a lead. Because what I've found a lot of the times is that I try to make the correct macro play in the game, my team ends up getting caught out because I'm not there, we end up throwing the game. So even though you know a certain play is the correct one, if your team isn't gonna make it, or if your team isn't going to listen to you, then just adapt to how they're playing, play with your team, especially when you do have a lead. Because if you got a lead, it doesn't really matter what you do. Like if you don't play macro when you have a lead, as long as you're grouped up, chances are you are still gonna win that game. So moving on to number 6, I did have this one in one of my previous videos to where we looked at why you win lane, but you still end up losing the game. So if you want to take a look at that video after you finish this one, then I'll leave a link at the top right hand corner of the screen. But I wanted to include it in this video as well because I do think it is super important, and that is to stop playing over aggressive when you don't have the knowledge to do so. If you don't know where the enemy jungler is on the map at the moment, or you don't have any vision, then just play back a little bit, let the wave crash into your tower. Don't risk going for 1 or 2 CS if it means you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position to get ganked, because if you end up getting ganked and there's a huge wave about to crash into your tower, or that's going to crash back into you, you're gonna miss all that CS, all that XP, you're gonna fall pretty far behind. So just accept the fact that in certain situations, you are gonna have to miss a couple CS to keep yourself in a safe spot in that lane. Every single game you should be keeping track of what the enemy team comp does consist of as well. If they do have a global champion on their team like a Twisted Fate or a Pantheon, then at level 6 make sure you are playing safer, not forcing any plays. If they got a really good roaming champion, say like a Talon or a Zed or a Fizz, just any champion that's going to be looking to roam a lot, then just adapt your playstyle to that game. Play a little bit safer. Don't like rely on your mid laner or your team to call a missing ping or to ping you off. Just realize that those champions are going to be looking to roam, so you should be playing safer if you do not know where they are on the map. So for number 7, you should always be focused on what the next play is on the map. So this is really good to do whenever you have any downtime. If you just cleared out a minion wave and you're looking to dip into the fog of war to get some vision, or just dip into the fog, then take a look at what objectives are spawning next. Take a look at what towers are up on the map. You can also do this when you are base and you're coming back to lane. So you should just always be prioritizing your vision around where the next objective is. Prioritize where you are on the map to where the next objective is. So for example, don't be bot side if you've got all the bot lane towers down. I know that does kind of seem obvious, but a lot of the time, especially in the mid to late game, you'll see your jungler farming the bot side of the map, farming his Krugs when Baron is up and when you don't have any vision on the Baron, and the enemy team just ends up sneaking a Baron, or they take the Baron because your team did not play around that next objective. So just always be focused on that. It is very important. So for number 8, this is going to be the one that helps you improve the most over the long term, and that is going to be to watch your replays and write down 1 or 2 things from that game that you're going to want to improve on in your next couple of games. So for example, if you want to improve your map awareness, if you notice that you end up dying to a gank when the enemy jungler is just walking over a ward but you don't end up seeing him, in your next games just hyper focus on improving your map awareness. Take a look at your map every 5 seconds. Get really good at that to where it becomes a habit, and then move on to looking at something else and hyper focusing on improving something else in your next games. What you'll see a lot of players doing is they'll try to focus on way too many things at once, and they'll try to improve like their CS, their map awareness, their macro, all at the same time. And if you're trying to do this, then yes, you might get a little bit better at each of those things, but you're never gonna get great at any one of those things. And if you never get great at any one of those things, it's probably not going to help you improve very much over the long term. So if you can just focus on 1 or 2 things, getting really good at them or getting great at them, and then move on to focusing on something else, then it is going to help you a lot in the long term, and you're gonna see a lot of growth out of this. And then for number 9, this one might be a little bit obvious to some of you guys, and it might be something you're already doing right now, but it is still super important. It is the one thing that, in my opinion, propelled myself from climbing when I did first start playing League, and that is to just be consistent with your role and who you play. So 1 main role and 3 to 4 champions max per that role. If you're trying to play way too many champions, if you're playing a new champion every single game, you're never going to be able to focus on the macro in your games and what you should be doing in certain situations, because you're always going to be thinking about your micro, and you're always going to be thinking about, oh, how could have I played that mechanically better? What ability should I be using in this situation? So if you can completely eliminate thinking about the micro and just have your mechanics just come naturally to you, it just allows you to focus way more of your time on the macro and what you should be doing throughout the game. I also wouldn't focus too much on who the OP champs are each patch. When you originally start your champion pool, I would kind of focus on that, and I would shape your champion pool based on some of the strongest champions. But after that, after you do make your champion pool and after you do consistently play those 3 champions, then I wouldn't change it too much after that. You can climb with any champion in the game. You can get to at least diamond with every single champion in the game. So just don't focus too much up on the analytics, the statistics of certain champions. If you have a good win rate on a champion that you play, and if you're confident on a champion that you play, then just continue to play them. Now for number 10, make sure you are using your 3LP dodge at least once a day if you do play a lot. If you don't play a ton, then some days you might not use your 3LP dodge at all if you do have really good team comps and you do have really good teammates. But if you do notice that you've got a troll on your team or you got a rager in champion select, then just look to dodge those kind of games. You can also take a look at team comps. If you notice that the enemy team just has way more crowd control than you have, that's a pretty good indication that if the game reaches mid to late and you start team fighting, you're likely to lose at that point and you're likely to not end up winning that game. So based on team comps and just based on if you got a troll or a rager, you should be looking to dodge games with your 3LP dodge. Now, I wouldn't worry too much about dodging off-roll teammates or dodging if your teammate has a low win rate on a champion, but what you can do is you can op.gg your team, so you can copy paste your entire team into op.gg, take a look at the win rates they have on the champions they play, and if you notice that your jungler is autofilled, that's usually a pretty good time to dodge. In the higher elos especially, if the jungle's autofilled, chances are you're gonna lose that game, but for the lower elos, I wouldn't focus on this too much just because you're going to have teammates experimenting with champions. You're gonna have people first timing champions a lot more in the lower elos. So if you do use this strategy and you dodge every single time you have an off roll or every single time you got someone first timing a champion, you're just gonna end up dodging way too much. So higher elos, I would use this one more, but for lower elos, don't pay attention to it too much. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. Those are 10 tips that, if applied, should drastically improve your climb here for the end of season 9. If you guys did enjoy this video, then be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you haven't already. I also do have a playlist of low elo mistakes, so if you haven't taken a look at any of those videos before, then I'm sure you'll find something helpful there. So I'll leave an annotation up on screen here as well. With that being said, guys, thanks for watching. Have an awesome day, and I'll see you in my next video.